Welcome to a special episode of Fire Breathing Kittens. This is our rules discussion where we discuss the rules we played in the past dozen games for spring 2025. I play Grum, and today I'm joined by the person who played Hefty.
We'll discuss the TTRPGs Dungeoncaster, Vaesen, the solo play systems InkSea, The Abyss, and Exclusion Zone Botanist, and Risus Epic, travel-sized role-playing game, Roll for Shoes, and Escape from an Endless Ikrala.
Let's dive right in, reading these reviews written by our Fire Breathing Kittens players and GMs. The episode of A Cabal of Kobolds featured the RPG system Dungeoncaster. Our first review says, "It was simple. I felt sometimes that the moves you were allowed to use were limiting, and we had to get a little creative of how to solve problems based on the move sets that are there. I love the cheat sheet. Mixed successes can feel a little punishing."
Our second review said, "I do like the simplicity. Overall, Dungeoncaster was a bit limiting though. Simple is nice in itself, but I think it was simple in a bad way. Sure, you can be creative and come up with your own ways to solve problems, but you have to make your own solution, what you want to do to solve the problem, and force it to fit somewhere. You have to fit your solution into the shape of the hole that the moves are. A lot of times you have to force it in. Also, I'm not really a fan in general of when systems give the player too much power to decide things. Maybe that was a way to counterbalance against the simple in a bad way. The rules say that the player gets narrative control when they roll a 20+. I don't care how high you roll in a TTRPG, I don't think a player should have any narrative control. I think that should always be the DM's territory to some degree. The player should just be the player. Their character is their territory. The world is what the character reacts to. Not that I'm against stuff like that when a player is given the impetus to decide how a situation gets resolved. I think it's more like specifically for creating threats. Maybe it was just my understanding of it, but creating your own threats seems like a weird thing to give players control over.
For a third review, the system is fairly straightforward, which is great for games where you want to create a game that can overlap with the D&D genre. For the GM, I found the inspiration currency to be difficult to handle. Not quite sure how to use the inspiration to create threats, and I think player-created threats would be better off named something else, maybe opportunities. The other part that was challenging for me as a GM was understanding some of the more story parts, like when is it good to call for a roll? What are the better ways to escalate a threat? There's advice for this in the rule book, but I don't think I've mastered them in the limited amount of time I've played.
Another reviewer said, Dungeoncaster at its core is a game where you roll multiple dice and take the highest result and add it to a d20 dice roll. Your character has 3 stats, will, force, and charisma, and 3 moves they can do for each stat. The moves were the most jarring part for me, as things like scouting to find something hidden doesn't logically, for me, fit under the force stat. And defending someone from harm seems like a force move, but it's the will stat. So I think the creator's insistence on 3 moves for each stat might have been the reason why some of those moves are under some of those stats. But I also understand why a limited number of moves is good. Having a bunch of moves is really overwhelming for players, too. Some powered by the Apocalypse games have like 40 move options, and it's really overwhelming. So 9 moves is good, but the moves that exist I didn't find intuitive. Like another person said, it felt like forcing a square peg into a round hole using those moves. I also personally did not feel comfortable using the forced healing mechanics, where you're encouraged to say something that hurts a relationship in order to heal a harm. For me, being mean to my fellow players is not why I play tabletop role-playing games. If it comes down to my character dying in the game or me saying something to hurt the relationship with a fellow player, I'd rather make a new character. And those were our reviews. Does anyone else have any thoughts about Dungeoncaster?
I thought it was an interesting system when I did listen to the playback. Again, some of the same complaints, limited skills, square peg in a round hole, they all tend to fit. It's probably not one I would play long term, but it was definitely interesting for a one-shot.
Yeah, I like that one-shots give us the freedom to try out rule systems and then be like, okay, that one compares to this one this way. Like, I definitely would rather play Dungeoncaster than Dungeon World, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game where you have so many moves to read that as a player, it's like they fit on 2 pages. So there's that. It's better than other Powered by the Apocalypse style games. I don't know.
Fair.
But I don't like those games, so I don't know. Maybe I'll find one day that I love, and I'll keep playing them until then, right?
It's interesting what different people do with the same framework.
Yeah, they're very different. Like, they're both move style games, but they feel very different in terms of like overwhelming and playing with them and freedom of choice when you play as a player. Yeah. That concludes my thoughts.
And mine. All right, the next episode, For Better or Worse, featured the RPG system Vaesen. Our first review says, really enjoyed the system and the setting. I feel like Vaesen is a system designed to tell particular stories. The way that it's designed really fosters that kind of storytelling. It knows what it's about and it does it well. There are a couple of pieces related to monster checks and interactions with player characters that weren't immediately intuitive, but I don't know that it's my own lack of system mastery or things that could benefit from greater clarity or hand-holding for people new to the system. For example, the fear check stats for a ghost. It has fear 2-1, and I was trying to interpret if that means a player character needs 2 successes to ignore it. Then later, for the terrified piece from the rules, you roll for the number of rounds you're terrified for, and I wasn't sure if I was dealing out as many conditions as I was supposed to be. But I think that would become clear with more time spent with the system.
Yeah, your first time running a combat in a system is tough sometimes when it's just dashes and 2s and stuff like that.
Yes.
I can totally see where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
It's nice for the creator of the rulebook to put like an example combat in when you're going to shorthand your combat stats for your enemies in the monster manual part of it. Yeah. Our second reviewer said, I really liked Vaesen. It's a horror game where the structure is the more checks you do, the more likely you are to accumulate negative conditions. You're building towards a spiral as things kick out and go sideways for your party. The second we entered our first combat, I was like, whoop, I should not have done this. I am now significantly closer to death than I prefer. It's an excellent system for telling that kind of story, and that was great.
Horror games are always fun, at least for me. I don't know about other people. I tend to like horror games a lot.
Yeah.
So listening to it, I saw that dynamic, and I appreciate that dynamic. I've played other games that are very similar in that dynamic. Maybe we'll get to play 1 or 2 here. We'll have to see later on, but I definitely like the horror theme for that particular aspect.
Yeah, the monsters are real and they will kill you.
For our next review, I really liked Vaesen. I've played a few different D6 games before. Sometimes you can feel a little drowned in D6s, but I think this game, keeping it to just D6s and limiting the number, really made it flow nicely. To find out what your modifier is, you determine how many dice you roll is very simple and easy. You weren't looking across the character sheet to find your number. The game system lends itself nicely for creating a narrative amongst the players and the GM. A very fluid and open system. I would play Vaesen again. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I have recommendations. So if you enjoy Vaesen, you might also enjoy other games by the Free League Press publisher. So that's the people who write the rulebook wrote other rulebooks that are similar. One of them is Alien, the RPG. And I heard someone say that Alien, the RPG is the first TTRPG they introduced new people to, not Dungeons and Dragons, because you can fit all of your character sheet on one page and all of your stats are nestled under one another, sort of like Dungeoncaster tried to do. But the number next to the stat is the number of D6s you roll. So a person who's never played a TTRPG before ever, they're like, I don't know, what modifiers? What? I add what number to what number? How many dice do I roll? So I roll the number and then I add a number to it. That sort of player would fit really well with this sort of rule system where it's just the number on your page, which is just one page, is the number of D6 you roll. You don't add anything to it. If there's a D6 on your dice, you succeeded, and if not, you didn't. Straightforward. So Vaesen, Alien the RPG, other things by Free League are number of d6s rolled, that's what your stat is. That's what that stat number means. And it's so easy to learn and play.
And I've seen that. I've seen it with the D6 systems. I've seen it with a couple of D10 systems as well that do the same thing. It's just one particular die that you use and the number that you roll. Sixes are easier to find, but I've seen it done with some other dice as well. So,
Yeah.
all right. The next episode, the April Fool's Day 2025 episode, feature the Soul Play RPG systems InkSea the Abyss and Exclusion Zone Botanist. First review, Exclusion Zone Botanist is a solo play RPG where you draw plants. I learned some new words for leaf shapes, so it definitely lived up to its botanist name. And the Exclusion Zone did stand a real threat of corrupting your character. Overall, it is what it had promised to be. I enjoyed the detailed and plentiful table options for randomly generating plants.
Our next review says, InkSea the Abyss is a solo play RPG about exploring underwater. There are mechanics for how much light and energy you have. It facilitated both a sense of danger from undersea leviathans and wonder for appreciating the ocean environment. Anyone else have any thoughts?
So I listened to both of them. The Exclusion Zone Botanist was interesting, but I think it probably fits more for sitting around the table, as had been mentioned. It's almost like a Pictionary RPG, if you want to
Yes.
think about it that way. So it doesn't seem to lend itself to podcasting. Even video podcasting might be a little bit challenging for it. It's definitely an interesting mechanic. Now, the InkSea the Abyss was interesting to me, not as much for the mechanics. I've always been a little wary of card deck based games because I think they take a little bit of space to work out and to lay out and do things of that nature. I just found it interesting for the choice, knowing the history of the character behind it. So that, it was an interesting choice for a solo adventure to reclaim the character. So I found that a very appropriate, interesting, and thematic choice.
Yeah, that's a great thing to talk about. So before the player, so the character's name is Newson, and before this happened, before the solo play, Newson died in an episode, and so the player was like, well, what do I do for my dead character? I want to keep playing my character, but they are at the bottom of the ocean. And so we were talking about, like, you could maybe do a solo play, because a solo play, it's just you, your character, on a quest, and it makes sense for your quest to be get from the ocean to the land again so you can go on more adventures with your friends. So let's find an appropriate solo play RPG for that. And InkSea the Abyss was perfect, gives you mechanics for getting up from the ocean depths. I think Newson wakes up in a sunken underwater, like, concrete structure and has to get to a place where they can go back to the surface, possibly getting eaten by leviathans on the way. So solo plays can be really good for developing your character if that's a thing that you want to roleplay to do, or if your character's dead and you want an explanation for why they're not dead anymore.
And I also found, and again, the Exclusion Zone Botanist, the story you told was very good, because you were giving background and some flavor to your character. So it was very good. I enjoyed it from that aspect, not necessarily from the rules, but at least from thematically. So.
Why does this possum talk? Because this thing happened to her. You can listen to it. This is why she talks. Yeah, solo plays are great. I think if more people played solo plays, they would expand their role-playing capacity, because it gives you something to draw on. Some people write, like, long Word document backstories for their character, and that's what lets them roleplay them so well. And solo plays are an alternative, or bonus option to that because you went on this adventure with your character, I can roleplay as them much easier now. It's a good tool. Yeah.
It is one I have not explored, but which I am planning to explore. So yeah. I'll have to look at it in the future.
Yeah, and a great way to find solo play RPGs is there's these websites. There's itch.io, itch.io. There's Drive-Thru RPG, and Reddit subforums that make lists. And those so those first two are like, you can type in the search bar and find things. You can type solo play or solitaire games or one-player games. And the third one, Reddit, is like a list that has been curated for you of solo plays. And you can sort those by free. And I think that's what we did at the time. I think Exclusions and Botanist now costs money, but it didn't at the time or something like that. I don't know. But they have a big old list is really nice because they're all very different.
Definitely will be taking a look. The episode Eclectic Chocolate Dreams featured the RPG system Risus Epic. Our first comment says, decent quick start system that lends itself to good storytelling and RPG opportunities. The cliché system allows for character background without the need to write multiple pages. Great for foundations of characters to build through play. It rewards creativity in aligning the clichés to varied skills. Perfect for one-shot adventures, though I would be curious to see how it scales for longer-term campaigns. There's a bit of an awkward dice mechanic in the inclusion of a D16, but that can be bypassed through digital means or by the eclectic dice collector.
The second reviewer said, I love Risus Epic, or perhaps it is pronounced Risus Epic, so I'll say, the second reviewer says, I love Risus Epic. It allows almost complete freedom to envision and execute a story in any capacity. I think having the players justify their actions through their cliches and describe their actions is quite fun. Anyone else have any thoughts?
So it was an interesting system. I myself have long played fudge or fate type systems, which are very similar to having the cliches and things of that nature. So it was very familiar to me. Like I said, the dicing is a little awkward, but overall it's good for storytelling and narrative play.
I have played it before. I didn't play it in this adventure, but I have a thing about systems where the GM can pick any dice they want to roll against the player. And the problem with Risus Epic is that if you're rolling, like let's say your cliche is a D4, a 1 to a 4, there is no result you can get that is not great, you know? And as a game master, how do you interpret someone rolling a 1 to a 4 versus someone rolling like a D16? Okay, you got like a 5 on your D16, that should be great, but it can never be as great as the person rolling a D4 who got the lowest number on their dice. And then for some GMs, the problem is, do I interpret it the percentage of bad that you got on the dice, which if you get a 4 on a D4, that's the worst number you could have gotten? Or is it like a 5 on a D16 is pretty good for what you could have gotten? Or do I interpret the absolute value of the number, which is a 4 is better than a 5? So because that's not clear for the interpretation, I straight up dislike Risus Epic. Because that lets... the point of a tabletop role-playing game is to clarify whether the GM is right or whether the player is right. That is the fundamental purpose of a role-playing game. I, the player, hit. The GM says, no, you didn't hit. Well, who's right there? The tabletop role-playing game rules will tell you. When the tabletop role-playing games don't tell you who won, was it the player or the game master? Well, I think I got a 4, so I think I did fantastic. No, you got a 4, so you did awful. You fail. Then the TTRPG is failing its purpose of how to interpret the dice rolls. So that's just my opinion. Straight up, anytime there's a GM interpretation problem, I don't like the game. But I appreciate that other people like the game. And I think everyone's opinion is valid.
And I don't think we got that deep in playing it that we got to that point for some kind of interpretation of that fact.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the GM for that episode, had a standard table of, what 1 through 20 meant as how difficult a challenge was. So,
well, that's a great GM. That's not a great system.
Fair.
When you invent ways to become standardized in your interpretations, that just makes you an awesome person that I want to play with. And that is Fire Breathing Kittens to me. It's full of people that are great and that I like playing with. Yeah.
Right. That's
hopefully
all my
he listens
thoughts.
to this episode. Yeah. Oh, the combat in Risus Epic is also that as you play, you whittle your opponent down, and you get worse and worse dice over time. And for a heroic system, that mechanic is usually not featured. It's usually a horror game mechanic that your stats get worse.
Get worse as you...
To see that in an air quotes epic game, but I am getting worse and worse. I've gone through 3 combats now, so my D4 is now up, it's worse at a D10 because of my 3 combats. I'm tired, you know. Usually that's a horror game mechanic to make your own stats worse. It doesn't encourage the feeling of epicness.
I guess I can understand that. Although, I mean, how would you compare it to systems that, you know, at injured you're at a -1, at this you're at a -2, so on and so forth?
Well, HP is different than stats. So, like, if you literally can't pick a lock as good because you were in a combat before, that's a horror game mechanic. Your stats have, your abilities have decreased. Like, your sanity decreases is a classic horror game thing. So HP, where it's like, I have 2 out of 15 HP, but I can pick this lock just as good as I always can. That's more of like an epic game feel. Your HP is down, but...
No, what I was talking about is when your HP or your health level is down, you get a modifier.
Right, that kind of modifier to your stats. Right, so it's decreasing your ability. That's typically not a...
heroic
There's
game.
like types of games, like heroic and like legendary type feeling. Like there was one, Neo Tokyo or something like that. Let me look up the games. But the whole point of that game was to make you feel as legendary as you possibly could. That one, although it was very hard to play, had a lot of rules. It really made you feel epic. More than Risus Epic, which is named Epic.
Epic, right.
Yeah, so let me search my
and you use
folder real
epic
quick.
cliches to describe yourself. Yes, okay, that's fair.
Let me look up what that game was called. I think it was called Neo Tokyo. New Edo. Really makes you feel more epic than Risus Epic, which is named Epic. So if you're looking for a game that makes you feel really epic, I'd say check out New Edo, because you might like it. You feel very epic in that game. You don't get weaker as time goes on. Yeah.
All right.
New Edo. There we go. Neo Tokyo. This is not the same. Okay.
Are we good?
Yes, this concludes my thoughts about the problematic game Risus Epic that everyone else loves.
All right. For our next set of reviews, the episodes of The Crab with the Golden Claw, Midas Mayhem, and Sea Path My Father featured the travel-sized role-playing game abbreviated TSRPG. Our first review says, overall, I really like the system. It's obviously very light, bare bones, but it worked really well within those constraints. I don't think I've ever played a system that uses the pick a number approach to task resolution. It works surprisingly well. It's clever because you can play it anywhere, like on a bus, but it also leads to moments of real drama, particularly when the GM has prepared their numbers in advance. My only quibble is, with the one-use only bonuses, I didn't like having to choose to use them before knowing the result. I'd rather have the option to use it afterwards, knowing that if it will impact the outcome of the challenge, to make sure it isn't wasted, which can be a bit of a feel-bad moment. In the game we played, using one of these bonuses as a pry bar worked well because the GM let us use it multiple times on the same attempted action. But generally, I prefer systems where you can choose to apply a limited use item after seeing the result. That is a major quibble, though. As I say, I enjoyed the system overall. Being so light, it is also very flexible and can be used for almost any genre of game. Once you're familiar with the rules, which shouldn't take long as there are so few of them, you can literally start a game anywhere, anytime. You don't need any rule books or equipment.
Yep. Our second reviewer says, it was hard for me personally to adjust to TSRPG, mostly because my background is more towards dice rolling games, so the number picking mechanic was a little strange at first. But once I kind of got used to it, it was enjoyable. I think if I had to say anything bad, I kind of wish that there was more different types of mechanics to make the game feel more immersive. I wish that we had known more about the healing aspect, otherwise I don't feel like we would have had a party member death.
Our next review says, it's a very quick start type of RPG, very easy to make characters, very easy to get started on an adventure. I'm not a fan of the number choice methodology as opposed to dice rolling or something else. I'd be interested to see how you could take this and work it through. Can you use it for one-shots? Yes, but how would it work campaign-wise over multiple sessions? Yes, the rulebook says you do get a larger range of items at higher level. We're playing this at low power level early in our season. I'd be interested to see how the system would perform at 70% or 80% of maximum power.
Yep. And our next reviewer says, I really like the system. It's simple and easy to get into. Travel-sized role-playing game is adaptable for lots of situations. It has just enough structure to be useful, but open enough that you can create whatever you want. The only thing I would say about it is if I was GMing, I would have a number chosen in the moment for each thing based on the feeling of the challenge. I would set each range in the moment as I go and not use pre-rolled ranges of always 15. Like swimming in the water for a lifeguard, why is that a 15 range challenge? He can swim, he's a great swimmer. That should have been something that's a 90% chance of success. Possibly pre-roll a list of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 range challenges so you have them all and can choose the range in the moment. If one character can do something easier than another, you can use a different range.
Interesting. All right. Our next review says, I like it. I think it was a lot of fun. My character has a very high mental stat because they're supposed to be very intelligent, but they're not supposed to be very charismatic. With just the one mental stat, they can only be good at both. It's not like they can be bad at one and good at another. I like TTRPG.
Our next reviewer said, I
was going to say, seems a bit conflicting. Likes the system, but doesn't like the mashup of stats.
Yeah, mental stat being used for all mental things, intelligence and charisma, is a good point. You know?
So.
Yeah. What if your character is intelligent but not charismatic? Well, both of those things would be mental challenges. So if you have a really high number in intelligence, you're also going to be very charming. But overall, it's a good game. They like, yeah. Am I reading the next one? Yeah, that's me. The next feedback says, I like how easy and approachable the system is for players. It's not a one-pager, but it's still not too much to pick up. I feel like it needs a little bit more nuance. The intelligence versus charisma could be separate. In the game Sexy Battle Wizard, sexy and wizard are two different stats. And I would split the physical too, like strength and dexterity would be the two sides of the same physical stat. I also would like the rules clarified because I'm not sure if every failure moves you up the injury tree or not, or is it just the failures in combat, or when being attacked in combat. I think GM discretion for level of damage was in the rules, but it wasn't very clear.
And for our last comment on this system, I enjoy it. The system is simple but effective. I like that it is very easy to pick up and play. I do like the hidden number and number range resolution mechanic, which I think works very well. It means you can literally play by talking. You don't need any equipment, really. You could play anywhere. I agree that sometimes it does feel a bit not monolithic, but when you have only two stats, it takes away a bit of differentiation of character. I felt that the damage or hindrance system is a little bit limiting. Although it can be got around through the narrative devices, I would like there to be a bit more fine-grained detail in there as well. But again, not too much, because I do like the simplicity. Anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah. There's something to be said about a game that you can make people play with you very quickly and easily. I GM a lot of games, and it sort of, I have noticed, that's a good non-judgmental way of saying, I have noticed that it is more empty of players when the rulebooks are 300 pages long. There. I'm not going to say it's the player's fault for not signing up for my games. I'm not going to say it's the game creator's fault for making a 300-page game. I'm going to say they're emptier. People don't want to play those as much with me. For a game like Travel-Sized RPG, where I was like, yo, just make this physical, mental, give yourself an item and a trait, and you can join my game. What do you know? A whole bunch of people signed up to join my game. So, again, at its core, tabletop role-playing games have a few things that they need to do, and one of those is get butts in chairs. And Travel-Sized RPG gets butts in chairs. It really does. Like, people will play with you. Like, they will sign up to play with you, and they will not have a problem creating a character, and at the end of the day, that's important, you know? Is it great for long-term play? I don't know. Is it great for short-term play? It was fun for our one-shots.
It does lend itself to that. It does lend itself to the shorter game. It's so if you want to think about it, some of these 300 plus page rule books, which is where I started. All of them were like that. You really didn't have a lot of one-page RPGs or things of that nature, but they were built for campaigns, things that go on for years. And with the time and everything that's going on now, people have time to sit down possibly for a one-shot or something that may take 2 sessions to get through. Or, how many of these would you see played at a con versus the 300 pagers get played at a con? Because of how detailed you have to get and how rules tied you have to be. So there's definitely a place for these shorter games. And I think even the fire-breathing kittens model works out perfectly for those shorter games.
Yeah, we get to do long-term storytelling with different mechanics. I don't think every group works that way, but like you said, with conventions and getting people to... They actually have like competitive gaming, tabletop role-playing games at conventions where 2 groups of players will go through the same dungeon and have points at the end, like for how well they solved the dungeon. You killed this many monsters before your character died. You opened up this many random rooms before your character died. You opened up this many treasure chests of gold. You have this many gold pieces. So it's kind of interesting, like, the different ways you can use tabletop role-playing games to gather and do an activity with people. When you're playing the same system, every time you sit down, you can do stuff like that. They also... I am old, and I will say this. There used to be a thing where you would just meet up and make your characters, and that was your first meetup. Like, hey group, hey gang, sitting around the table, we're all going to make our characters. It's going to take us 4 hours, and this is what we're going to do. Like, that was a thing.
The original session 0.
Yeah, the original session 0 was like, you straight up need all of this time to just fill out your character sheet.
And when I was doing it, again, I'm old as well. It wasn't just that, because the reason it was session 0, 9 out of 10 times it was like, look, I just got this in the mail. It's brand new. Let's open it, crack it, and all sit down together and learn the rules and make a character. So,
yeah.
And it's, again, the original session 0. But yeah, it's very interesting that way. Also, now you have me curious when you were talking about competitive dungeons or competitive games. Is that where the companion episode idea came from?
Not at all.
Okay. Just curious.
So we'll talk a bit about that. In Fire Breathing Kittens, we sometimes have enough people, which is a blessing and amazing, enough people to want to do the game that we need to do 2 groups of people around the table. Like, if you've got 9 people who want to play a game, maybe don't have them all sit down at the same table. Maybe have them, like, GM it twice and have 4 people at each table, or 4 or 5 or... So a companion episode also is interesting because these are, as I said, we do long-term storytelling. These are custom written adventures to the characters. So in the old days, it was a module, and the GM didn't actually write it. They cracked a book, they cracked a magazine, and they ran the players through a dungeon that it didn't matter if your character had a history of being a mermaid, a centaur, or a gnome that made tinkering tools. You were going through this dungeon with the same monsters and the same possible endings. With how we do it, we write the adventure to the players. So, like, if you were a mermaid in your past and you were escaping from the vicious Shark Lord, the Shark Lord's going to be in the adventure. Or someone, related to the Shark Lord, there's going to be a pool of water and you're going to be like, my friends, reach his hand out across their chest. Don't go into the pool of water. I fear there may be a Shark Lord inside. He's been coming after me for much of my life. And if this pool of water connects to the ocean through an underground tunnel, they could be inside, and they could have set this whole thing up for us to be in this dungeon in the first place. And you have this like chance at storytelling there. What was my point? Companion episodes. You get that same prompt with another group of players, doesn't know about the Shark Lord. They go in the water. They get attacked. Yeah, they get attacked by a shark. So it's really fun to see the different choices, and it, like, you got a box, right? Do you open the box? Do you kick the box? Do you walk past the box? There's choices and free will that people role-playing as their characters will make different role-playing choices to make. My character is inquisitive and suffers from consequences frequently. They would open the box with no precautions. Or My character is inquisitive, but knows what a 10-foot chicken stick is, will poke the box first, and it exploded, but 10 feet from me, I don't die as much, you know. So, or my character would just walk past that box. I ain't suffering no box fool. Like, it's fun. Yeah, companion episodes are just a thing that happened because we had a blessing of many, many players, and then they were just so fun that now we set them up on purpose. Because it's really fun to laugh at the explosion or the walk by, you know, when you listen to the other one happen.
Go back and if you did not play in that episode, see what you missed or see what you got that somebody else did not.
Yes.
So.
Because the definition of an opportunity cost is something that you cannot ever have because you chose something else instead. Like when you have a $100 bill, if you spend it on movie theater tickets, you don't have that $100 bill to buy groceries. Right. I've explained drug addiction in one sentence. So, but also free will. If you turn left down a path, if you befriend this enemy, then you can't see what it's like to beat them to death in a combat.
Yes, we know you like combat. So okay.
I love combat. But yeah, so companion episodes are just fun. And for people who are interested in travel-sized role-playing game, TSRPG, the two companion episodes that you can listen to are The Crab with the Golden Claw and Midas Mayhem. It's the same exact word-for-word Game Master prompts, as if the Game Master were reading a module magazine. They're written down, but for two different groups of players, and the outcomes were so different, you guys. Like, super different. It was fun. Yeah. I have rambled enough. All right, let's move on.
All right. The episode Don't Go Bake in My Heart featured the RPG system Roll for Shoes. Our first comment says, I absolutely love this game. The simplicity of the rules make it a quick start and easy pickup with no barrier to entry. It allows for a lot of creativity for both players and DM. The skill, do anything, means if you think it, you can do it. Well, at least you can try.
Yeah. Our second reviewer said, I really like the idea of having a system where you over time get better and better at something. It is pretty self-balancing at the way you're getting better and better at specific skills. You're getting better at specific actions, and you have the vague actions all the other time. However, personally, I've always been of the mind that as much as I like freedom, I think that it's more interesting to be creative when there are more clear limits set in place, because if you can do anything, then you can always just do whatever would most directly solve the problem, instead of trying to figure out how to use what you have available to solve the problem. I like there to be more degrees of separation between the solution and what I can do with my mind. And I actually kind of want to comment on that person's specific feedback. There's a game called Scribblenauts where you literally like draw a thing. It's like a Nintendo DS game. Let me do a quick Google search to make sure I'm not making this word up. I think it was called Scribblenauts. Yes, that was the name of the game. Confirmed. So it's a game called Scribblenauts, and you draw a thing. You like, you know, you've got a gap between you and the gold coin you're trying to get to or whatever. And you say ladder, and then the ladder like falls down horizontally and you walk across it like a bridge and you get to the little island that you were trying to get to. Or like wings and you just fly there. Scribblenauts is a terrible game. Because there is one solution that works for every single puzzle, like wings, right? This is why flying is highly limited in tabletop role-playing games. And if you can just generate that solution for everything, it turns out if you can fly, a lot of these platforming games are very simply solved and boring. So Scribblenauts is hilarious because once you figure out that solution, you just do it for every level. And then it's like, there's my solution. And the designers of the game had no idea what wings did to their system or whatever, you know, what the one solution was. And so they didn't like, it's not custom designed to you. Each level continues to be solvable by wings. So you just continue playing and you're like, well, there's the solution. There's your problem. You didn't have wings. Were you playing in Mario and you just couldn't fly? Oh, let me solve this for you. So this reviewer totally reminds me of Scribblenauts because they used their do anything to, I think at one point there was like a mushroom dude holding a box of mushrooms in the episode and we're like, I cannot give you this box. And they were like, okay, can I have what's inside the box? And it was like, sure. It was just like solved. Next problem. So it It's very interesting to see GM created puzzles and player solutions to those puzzles, and that's why tabletop role-playing games will always be inherently better than a game like Scribblenauts, where the GM is some distant past person creating puzzles that you, the player, have solved, and they have no ability to react to. So tabletop role-playing games have a GM right there in the moment being like, ah, crap, you've solved my box problem. You know. They can then adapt to it and change their next problem so that simply asking for what's inside the box doesn't get
what they want. Yes.
Yeah.
No plan survives contact with the enemy. If you've GM'd, you know this.
Perfect. That's a great way to say it. So Roll for Shoes has that problem where it is Scribblenauts. You can create anything, and the GM better think fast. But for someone like Brennan Lee Mulligan, like I was seeing an improv thing where they had a minute to generate improv reactions to a prompt. And this, like, world famous, masterful GM straight up generated, like, I'm snapping my fingers. I hope this doesn't sound bad on the podcast. Like 20 different solutions in a row. And I was like, wow, that brain, you know? So when you get to play with a really smart GM, you know, Roll for Shoes can be fantastic. But yes, this reviewer hit the nail on the head. You can generate any solution to any problem. But I think that's why the GM who ran it keeps running it, because they are very smart and they do really love that you know, adaptation on the fly.
And your Brennan Lee Mulligan example reminds me, he has faced some of the most creative players out there. So it is a learned response.
It makes us better. It makes tabletop role-playing games worth playing. You know, it's why Scribblenauts was a failure of a handheld game, because it didn't have a person. It just had a computer, and you just kept using wings every single level. They
don't get to adapt on the fly. Ha ha ha.
Right?
Sorry.
Gosh.
Had to get that in there. All right. Moving on, our next review says, I love the flexibility. It's easy to pick up and fun to play. Endlessly replayable. It doesn't seem to get bogged down because the skills that you acquire are different every time.
This is true. Yeah, Roll for Shoes is unique in that way. Our next reviewer says, it felt unclear how many dice the GM had to roll against our efforts. I could see a GM rolling anywhere between 1 and 5 dice depending on their moods. The challenges were arbitrarily difficult. If we were constantly rolling against a single dice, then increasing our number of dice would feel like an accomplishment. But as it is, there's nothing stopping the GM from rolling as many dice as they want against us. So instead of growth, it felt like Calvin Ball, a game from Calvin and Hobbes, where the rules are made up by a 6-year-old on their whims and change often. Also, there weren't any mechanics for defending your allies or performing an interrupt reaction during an opponent's turn to block them from landing a hit on your friends. So that made it hard to play as a support class character in Roll for Shoes. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Now that's interesting, and you have mentioned just how freeform this is. Basically, you know, get out of jail. A lot of get out of jail free cards, basically, is what happens. But also, it sounds also somewhat limiting in mechanics that would allow for, I'm not going to say narrative play, but organized play. It seems very chaotic, at least from the description.
Yes, you absolutely true. And what you're describing is the difference between a lot of these like Powered by the Apocalypse games that are trying to emphasize that role playing versus like a combat simulator where the idea of interrupting an opponent's action to block an attack on their friend is explicitly stated in the rules, versus in Roll for Shoes, the GM did not know what the character was trying to go for and was like, well, you're acting out of turn order. Like, yeah, I'm acting out of turn order because I'm a tank defender, you know, I'm not supposed to hit I don't do crap to the enemy, you know, that's not my role here. There's online games that are very popular, especially on like internet forums like Reddit, where people will talk about tank, cleric, you know, tank, healer, DPS, and they're different roles. One person damages the enemy, but that person needs someone to defend for them and heal them. So Roll for Shoes, if the GM's not prepared for idea of the existence of other classes, like a tank or a healer, that aren't doing DPS, then the GM, there's nothing in the rules to prepare the GM for that. There's literally just 6 rules in roll for shoes. Like, you roll a dice, and if you fail, you get better at the thing. If you fail, you get points that you can use. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to read these. Hold on, give me a sec. Roll for shoes. Here's the 6 rules for roll for shoes. 1, say what you do and roll a number of d6s. That number of d6s is determined by the level of the relevant skill you have. 2, if the sum of your roll is higher than the opposing roll, the thing you want to happen happens. Now, my comment on that is they don't say what the opposing roll number of dice is. So our GM was rolling between 1 and like 500 dice. So 3, at start, you only have 1 skill. Do anything 1. And 4, if you roll all 6s, you get a new skill specific to the action, 1 level higher than the one you used. So you can like get a new skill, and you have 2 dice to roll now in your new skill. If you're so good at do anything that you get a new skill called throw, and then you can throw the item with 2 dice. And 5, for every roll you fail, you get 1 experience. And 6, experience can be used to change a dice into a 6 for advancement purposes only. Nothing about those rules prepares a game master for a tank, a cleric, a DPS. And so they got confused when a character tried to do a thing during the enemy's turn, because in Dungeons & Dragons, it's clearly like an intercept, an attack of opportunity, you know?
A reaction, yeah.
A reaction.
Yeah.
But nothing about this role-playing game prepared them for combat simulation, which I love.
Yes, and like I said, just from description, I've not had a chance to listen to the episode yet, but it sounds very, very chaotic. It would, having GM for a long time, I would find it very challenging.
Well, but Scribble Knots, right?
Yeah.
What if you could do Scribble Knots with other people? It'd be so much more fun. So, pros and cons.
Pros and cons.
And it's another one of those gets butts and chairs games. Like, you literally
Very
just show up,
quick.
there's no character sheet. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
I'm going to have to go back and read the rules and then listen to the episode. It'll probably be enlightening.
It's different. It's definitely different. And butts and chairs is important. Hey, you want to play a game with me? There's no character sheet. Just show up. It works.
As opposed to, look, we really need a cleric.
I don't know if I want to be a cleric, you know, etc. Yeah.
All right. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. For our next episode, the episode Creepy Crawlers featured the RPG system Trapped in an Endless Ikrala. Our first review says, I thought the rules of Ikrala were pretty easy, straightforward. The system was pretty fun to work with. We had a really good time.
Our next reviewer said, the thing that caught me off guard was combat being just the swinging. I'll say that word again, swinging. I know that D&D sometimes gets a bad rap for all the mechanical pieces around combat, but it felt difficult not having a framework for doing things beyond doing damage. I really enjoyed the replenishing hit points, the mechanic of hit point economy in and out of combat. I felt like I just had to get through each combat and I'd be okay because I'd fully heal.
Okay. Our next review says, I really like the system. I think the setting is really fun. The rules play into it well, especially hearing that the same thing about the escalator every time depresses you fast and in an effective way. The combat does take some getting used to. It's unique because it makes it, if I stay close to something, I'm much more in danger than I am in D&D because it's always going to hit me. But if I get to attack first, I know I'll hit it and we'll do a lot of damage. Always hitting makes initiative order matter more because there is no chance of missing. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I have an apology to the creator. I GM'd this episode and it said the HP varies between 1 and 6. And I was like, I looked at that and I was like, oh, if the HP is 1, they're going to die a lot. So I was like, everyone just, just start with HP 6. I don't want to kill you in the first 10 minutes of the game and have to figure that out. So just start with HP 6 and we'll see what happens. And that was a mistake on my part because this game can handle HP reduction because then any HP reduced goes into the stats. And you don't actually die until your stat, which starts out at like 12 or something, goes down to 0. And so I just assumed that my players would need more HP. But because HP auto replenishes back to full the moment they're safe, it actually like super worked out amazingly. This is a very interesting system. It didn't need HP 6. Like, I wish I would have let them start with, I think they were 4, 2, and something else. When they rolled, they just rolled a d6 to generate it. And I really should have just let them go with that. And I'm going to stop even trying to modify games before playing them. I normally super avoid doing that. And I was like, y'all gonna die. Like, so I just did that this time. 6 is technically within your range. Just start at that. I shouldn't have done that. My bad. I think the game creator's name is Javier or something like that. My bad, Javier. That was the GM's fault. Should have just let them start with 2. Because we actually ended up never seeing a character even get any stats reduced. And I think that really had us miss out on some of the mechanics. So I always say I don't homebrew games. And there I was kind of fiddling with things. I shouldn't have. I didn't technically break any rules. But if one of them had 2 hit points, it would have been more fun. Oh, and I love that if their inventory is full, they have 0 hit points. That actually made it very interesting. Because people would like choose to hold on to an item and then be at 0 hit points. And if you're hit when you have 0 hit points, it reduces your stats. Like I said, your stat would go down from 12 to 0 with each hit you get. And if your stat goes down to 0, then you actually die. So I would definitely play Trapped in an Endless Ikrala again. Or more liminal horror games. Ikrala is an expansion and a setting expansion for Liminal Horror, the rule set, which is also free. And I really liked it. It didn't feel like horror-y to me. It felt just fun, Yeah.
Okay. It sounded like a survival horror game when I was reading the rules and taking a look at everything.
It is.
So it's, I mean, I get, with the mechanics but again, first time playing through. Now, if we play again, you'll know better for the next time, not to game it too much. You don't replay games, I know.
But I don't replay games, yeah.
Oh, well, yes and no. I mean, TSRPG, TSRPG you ran and then you played.
Yeah. I prefer not to replay games.
You prefer not to replay games.
But I would play Liminal Horror, which is a different game. And it has a magic system, which we did not use in Ikrala. So I would definitely play Liminal Horror.
Interesting.
I'm talking too much. All right. So that was Trapped in an Endless Ikrala. It was really fun. Would play it again if I replayed games. Okay. Favorite game. Let's talk about that. Dungeoncaster, Vaesen, InkSea the Abyss, Exclusion Zone Botanist, Risus Epic, travel-sized role-playing game, Roll for Shoes, and Escape from an Endless Ikrala. What's your favorite?
So again, I did mention this toward the very beginning. Horror games are my thing. I really like horror games. So Vaesen really resonated with me. I wanted to play the game, but I had a life event that took me away from playing that game. I did get the chance to participate in some of the creation of the story, which was used by the GM. I was very happy about that. But that is probably my favorite, followed probably closely second by travel-sized RPG, TSRPG. Yeah. Mostly because of the quick stand-up, and I find it to be a level playing field. Okay, when you're not rolling dice, it's kind of a level playing field. You're picking numbers. Originally, I was not a fan of it, and the more I thought about it, the more I went through it, I'm like, it doesn't eliminate the randomness, but it kind of levels the playing field with the characters to get things done. So it's a little bit interesting that way.
Ooh. I have some thoughts for you on travel-sized RPG. What if one person playing it picks a number and their range drops below, like it's a 15-point range, and their range drops below 1 or above 15? Is it the GM's responsibility to correct the player and say, hey, you're plus or minus 3. If you don't pick 2, if you pick 4 instead, your range will go, instead of 1 to 5, it'll go from 1 to 7.
No. I will let them make that mistake. I will absolutely let them make that mistake.
I see you have chosen a number that decreases your range of success. Noted. Moving on.
I'm all for this. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you? What are your favorites?
If I were to pick one that I had to play again, it would be Liminal Horror, the game that Escape from an Endless Ikrala is based on, because I was interested in this HP reduction and auto refilling mechanic, and then your stats whittling down. And I didn't get to see the magic system from Liminal Horror. So playing Liminal Horror would be the thing that I would replay. And then I don't want to replay any of the others ever.
Fair.
They are fine.
Fair.
All right. Most excited about what upcoming game? Here's the games we've got coming up, everybody. Tiny Pirates, Tales from the Loop, DC 20, Sexy Battle Wizards, Into the Odd, Coriolis Third Horizon, Fudge Light, and Dragonbane.
Well, I'm going to start off and I'm going to be completely biased to start off with. I'm running Fudge Light, so I'm really looking forward to it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I am currently involved at least in DC 20, which looks interesting if complicated. And I'm possibly looking at stepping into the Odd. I'm going to probably be looking at that shortly hereafter for that coming up if there's still a spot in there. But Fudge Light's at the top because I get to run it and get to torture players for a little while.
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about what each game is. Tiny Pirates is that you have like 3 traits and you have a pirate like persona and you're pirates. It's very like rules light, narrative encouraged. Tales from the Loop is that you're playing as the younger version of yourself and you've got like kid stats from the 1980s. You're not supposed to die in that game. And the GM is supposed to write like a time loop story. DC 20 is basically a reskinned D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, or Pathfinder. It's, I mean, I don't know if they're going to
kind of a cross between the two. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if they're going to get unique enough to have their own following. Are they going to lure people away from Dungeons and Dragons to just do more of the same? I don't know. I can never predict that. Sexy Battle Wizards is a game where you have 3 numbers, 3, 2, and 1. You assign one of them to sexy, one of them to battle, and one of them to wizards. And that's how many dice you roll. And based on whether or not you succeed or not, you accumulate stress and can explode and restart at your starting spawn location. I don't like restarting at your starting spawn location because in a combat, your friend dies, but they didn't actually die. You have to split the combat now between them and wherever they respawned at, you know. So you've got the party fighting and then you've got a person just sitting out and, hey guys, I'm back at the start. Yeah, we wandered away. Oh, I have to retravel. I love retraveling. I'll retravel and get to you from the spawn location to where you guys are at now. This is fun.
Sounds like a board game.
It's basically, yeah. I have to move my piece 10 spaces forward to rejoin the rest of the party. Yeah, that's Sexy Battle Wizards. Into the Odd, I don't know anything about it, but I like the Game Master. Coriolis Third Horizon is space stuff. It's like a Middle Eastern themed space world, and there's the darkness. the darkness between the stars that the GM uses to, as you said, mess with the characters, the players. There's Fudge Light. And it seems like you've got things you're good at and things you're bad at, and that's your character sheet. Like you rank things, you know, so you can never be perfect at anything, which I like.
It is a very narrative system. And yes, it is definitely a ranked system where, you know, you have to choose what you're good at and not good at. And I think it gives you a broad enough swath of abilities to make those differences that were comments on some of the other games. But it's also a quick start like some of those games as well.
Yeah. Yeah. LITE, Fudge Light. Hop in, join a game. You don't have a 4-hour character creation session 0. And then Dragonbane is by Free League Publishing, I think. Don't quote me. And it's got a really big online following compared to all the other games I listed. So it's something that, although I haven't read anything about, I assume is good. There we go. There's the upcoming games. Oh, I'm most excited about Into the Odd because I like the GM and I like not having a GM. I think 2 of these I'm GMing. So, Tales from the Loop and Dragonbane, those will be me. I'm not looking forward to writing a time loop story on purpose. I like surprising people with time loops, and I don't want people to be like, I'm going into this, and it's going to be a cool time loop story, and I have really high expectations. No, don't expect things from me.
I've seen, or I've listened to at least this season overall, I think 2 time loop. I was involved in 1 time loop.
Right.
But
Risus Epic.
Risus Epic was a time loop, and then one of the Borg episodes was a time loop that you were running, I believe. Cyborg.
Pirate Borg, Merkborg, Cyborg. Oh, there was a little bit of a time loop. There was a 5-minute time loop.
Yeah.
That was a little baby time loop. Yeah.
Little baby time loop, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but this is like the whole like impactful, meaningful time loop back to when you were 11 years old and then you as an adult. How have you changed as a person from your experience with the traumatic events that happened when you were a child, and how do you understand adults' actions more from this side of the loop?
A little bit different.
It like really has you forget the childhood events and have the true distance gap between you. You're 2 different people. It's your kid self and your adult self. You're not one person. Like, your kid self does not know what paying rent is, you know? Your kid self is truly a kid, and your adult self doesn't understand your kid self anymore. I don't know if I have that in me. I'm going to try it. It's better than cracking a module and running a magazine, right? Like, I don't want to write stuff. Anyway, also, nobody has signed up for that game because the character sheet is a monster. And I have 2 people who've said they're interested in joining that game, Tales from the Loop, but they just like straight up haven't sent me their character sheet yet. So there's some feedback for the creators, which is Free League Publishing again. Tales from the Loop. It's hard to get people to join me to play it. And as the GM, I'm not super excited about writing a time loop. A meaningful, epic time loop. So that's the one I'm least looking forward to because I feel like I'm going to let it down. And also no one wants to play with me. So, yeah. All right, here we go. All right. Well, there's our thoughts on all the stuff we did for this part of the year. We did a lot of stuff.
It's been definitely been a lot of games, and you know, I'm still catching up. I'm still catching up on this season to listen, but also looking forward to the stuff we're going to play. So it's going to be interesting to look at. You know, as I'm doing this now, I'm new. For those who don't know, I'm new this year, so learning these different mechanics and being able to compare and contrast is really interesting for me, especially this late in my age of playing, as I have not played systems that are this broad prior.
It's a different way to do TTRPGs. To do a different one every week. No one else does this. We're crazy doing it this way. Everyone else is like, you play a different TTRPG every week, and we're like, yeah.
Same character, different game.
Yeah. And they're like,
Definitely
why?
unique.
And we're like, well, we're a little strange and we really like talking about mechanics. Thank you for joining me in this mechanic talk. It was very fun. It's much better than if I was alone spilling my thoughts out into the void for no reason. So, thank you.
I enjoyed it, so thank you. I'll probably come back for another one. We'll see.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone who listened to this, and we'll see you. If there's any of these games that sound interesting to you, go listen to that episode. We said the episode title when we said every TTRPG name, so you can go back, listen to a 2 to 3 hour playthrough of it, maybe read the rulebook first, then listen to the playthrough. Whatever you want to do, it don't matter. Have fun, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. See you on the other side.
Bye-bye.
Bye.